Welcome to Rehash, a Web3 podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Rehash, a Web3 podcast. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and today we're speaking with David Phelps, founder of JokeDAO and investor at Cowfund, about bottoms-up on-chain governance, non-financial use cases for tokens, and we'll wrap up by getting a glimpse into David's Web3 investment thesis. But before we dive into our conversation with David, here's a quick word from the Web3 projects that helped make the season possible.
Web2 Social has become a world of walled gardens, where platforms own your data, your content, and your community. But Lens Protocol is a community garden, a user-owned, composable, and decentralized ecosystem designed to let Web3 social apps bloom. When you create content on Lens, you own it, you control it, you take it with you from app to app, and you decide how it's monetized. Instead of chasing ads and algorithms, you set the value of your work, and your community collects it directly from you. Here at Rehash, we'll be experimenting with this ourselves by posting all content from Season 3 on Lens, where our community can now truly interact and grow with us. So bring your photos and videos, your GMs, and your friends, and come join the new era of social media on Lens Protocol. Go to claim.lens.xyz to claim the last social media handle you'll ever need. And be sure to follow rehash.lens.
Contributing to a DAO can feel like this. Contributing to several DAOs can feel like this. But it doesn't have to. With Avenue, you can filter out the noise, get to know more DAOs, and start contributing right away. Avenue allows contributors to form organic teams to work together on the things they love. This means DAOs can operate, coordinate, and collaborate at a scale that used to be impossible. Because working together in a DAO should be like making music. The drummers drum, the singers sing, and when collaboration leads the way, a song emerges. No more relying on the core team to get things done. It's time to get your community contributing. To give your DAO the information they need to know, the tools they need to self-organize, and the spaces they need to work together, visit avenue.place.
Hey guys, thanks for hopping on here. I just wanted to touch base real quick.
What's up, Diane?
What's up? So first of all, I just wanted to say thanks, Tyler, for taking these meeting notes. They look great.
I didn't take those. I'll take credit for it, though.
Wait, that wasn't you? Do we know who it was? And who's been posting those hilarious meme videos on our Twitter?
Oh, I have no idea. There's a lot going on here, though. Like, how are we supposed to keep up with what everyone's doing?
I don't know. It feels like pure chaos being in a DAO sometimes. Ellie, what was that thing you were talking about that helps DAO contributors like add and organize all of their contributions?
Oh yeah, it's called Govern. It's like GitHub for DAO contributors.
Ooh, that sounds cool. How does it actually work?
Yeah, so it's actually a protocol where DAO members can add any task they've completed as a contribution. And then their fellow DAO members can attest to them to confirm that those contributions were valid without the need for a core team to do so. What you end up with is a simple bottom-up way for members to build out the DAO's contribution graph themselves. It gives contributors more power and freedom. It makes it a lot easier to accurately reward everyone. DAO members actually own all of their contributions, so if they want to jump into another DAO, they can actually prove they know their stuff.
Okay, I'm sold. Can it be on chain?
Of course, but on Gnosis chain, so transactions are super cheap.
Ooh. All right, yeah, I'm down. Diane?
Yeah, for sure. Let's set it up. What's the link, Ellie?
Just go to govern.app, and that's govern without the E, so GOVRN.app.
Perfect. All right, well, if you guys got this, I gotta jump back to another call. Hey, David. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Who did we just hear ads from?
Lens,
who were they?
Avenue, Govern.
Love them. Amazing projects. Can't recommend them highly enough. Use them every day. Just, yeah. What's the second one? What's it called?
Avenue?
What do they do?
Avenue.place.
Who are they?
They like aggregate your Discord channels together to make it easier to use. That's
one of
what
my
they have
favorite
right now,
services.
But they're
Incredible.
pivoting.
Incredible. Can't recommend them enough. Yeah. Yeah.
They're building even cooler stuff. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you. For anybody who isn't familiar with you, can you give people a little bit of an insight into your background, where you came from, how you initially learned about Web3 and got into investing and DAOs and all that good stuff?
Cool. I try to tell a different story for this every time that someone asks. So I'll try to give a new story that I haven't done before, including I think on the last time we did a podcast. I rarely talk about that. I started a company after working as a tutor for about a decade, actually, in New York. And tutoring is a really fascinating industry. It's partly fascinating because of the exploitation that goes on there, because tutors tend to, charge such high rates. Agencies can still pay them well while taking like 60, 70%. And what that means is that the ones who actually decide to pursue this as a career and go into it full time, I promise this will come back to Web3, who decide to actually go into it, end up leaving, and they do not work for agencies. And so what my co-founder and I decided we wanted to do was set up an agency of agencies, one that would really be a place we would want to work as tutors, and one that instead of taking 60, 70%, would take 15%, and thereby by taking a much lower take rate, be able to attract much higher talent of people who've really been in the game for a long time, and then give them the resources not only for representation and materials and community, but actually to build their own business as agents where they can refer to each other as well and effectively decentralize. And so, the central premise was if you lower your take rate, everything changes, because now you will have tutors who will not only stay with you, but they will bring their independent families through, because you're effectively an agent, same as like a basketball player would have an agent who can really represent them well. They will not churn. They will actually work more hours because they're getting paid a lot better. They will be more devoted, etc. And so you start getting all of these incredible effects of growth internally, where the tutors are now actually operating the business themselves and helping run it and drive it and grow it, because the take rate is so much lower and the service is so much better for them, and because the worker is being treated as the client rather than the client being treated as the client. And so that was really the insight when we started this 8 years ago, and it's just totally I say this as someone who also had a very failed company. It would totally worked. And it's fascinating today because even we've spoken a lot with potential buyers, and just nobody understands the model. They just don't get it. They're like, why wouldn't you just charge 50%? And the answer is, if you charge 50%, you destroy the entire model that has actually made this thing work. And so, I would say that the proto DAO is effectively what we built. It was one where the focus was on getting workers paid better than what they would get paid on their own, getting better service than what they would get paid on their own, being a value add to them, and fundamentally trying to come up with a model where your take rate has to be lower than the value you provide to people if you don't want them to churn, right? And if you treat them as non-fungible because they are unique and they have unique talents that cannot be compared with someone else's, and they form unique relationships with the people they work with. And so you think about service DAOs and how they operate in terms of both having a decentralized model where the workers can now effectively grow the business itself, and being able to refer to one another, and being treated in a way where the take rate guild, right, which I think has a 10% take rate, the take rate is lower than the actual value being provided. And you really start to have these sustainable models for these kind of often more boutique services as well. And so DAOs for me became really, really exciting about 2 years ago, because I thought, okay, this is what we built was really cool, but it's boutique, right? It has a lot of fundamental limitations in terms of the kind of markets that we can operate in, and who we can work with. And you imagine actually being able to use tech to decentralize, where you can have tokens, which effectively are not ownership, but wink, wink. And you also have tech in place for people to decentralize and really running it themselves, and growing it out and create P2P networks. And I think you can start to imagine a future tutoring agency will probably be run by students. It'll be students tutoring other students, and they'll be referring, to each other. And then when that student learns something, they'll be able to tutor someone else as well. And you can start to create these really incredible scalable kind of models, as well as, smaller composable DAOs as well. So it really, I have different stories every time for how I went down the crypto rabbit hole. I'm going to go with that one this time, but that's really the source of, my excitement with say DAOs in particular.
I'm actually really glad you chose to go down that route, because what we are focused on building at Rehash for the next few months is actually essentially a service DAO, like a Web3 version of a content agency. So it's a lot of what you talked about. Okay, so you get into Web3, you get into DAOs, and then the main thing that you're working on now is something called JokeDAO, which, contrary to the name, is actually not a joke at all. It is a bottoms up.
Do not slander us. Oh my goodness. What? Of course,
I don't want to get
it's
into
all a joke. It's all a joke, Diana.
I don't want to get into this right now. Joke Race has
It's an
really
ontological question. Yes.
me.
Yeah. Thank you.
I've talked to you about this. So JokeDAO is a bottoms up on-chain governance platform protocol. Do you call yourselves a protocol or a platform?
No, we're a platform. We're not that cool. Yeah. I mean, we're cool, but like we're
Okay.
not that cool. Like protocol is
Not
like,
that
you
cool.
know, what we're what we're
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
staking
Yeah,
tokens. Yeah.
yeah.
Like no.
Then it really wouldn't be a joke. Yeah. Okay. So bottoms up
We're
on-chain
joke
governance
protocol,
platform.
aka a
We
platform. Correct.
Yes. Exactly. Okay. So we used JokeDAO to choose our guests for this season of the podcast. And somebody actually nominated you, and a bunch of people voted for you. Not only that,
Governance
but
bribery totally works.
you
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
got the most number of votes. So tell people, how did you go
Yeah.
about bribing people to vote for you, and how did you
Yeah.
make it to the top of the leaderboard?
Well, this is really why I created JokeDAO, was so that I could finally win at things. You know, like as someone who's consistently lost over and over again in life, you know, being able to just create a platform that I personally control, and then I can just rig it is just like, yeah, an incredible unlock for my own, you know, very fragile ego. And so, yeah, all I did was, you know, just like hack into the code and just like, you know, threw some votes my way and done. Actually, no, the beauty of all this is being on chain is like that it's fully decentralized. You can't do that shit. But what you could do, which I didn't do, but you could do, is you could engage in some, you know, voter bribery as well with some rewards. And I could have, you know, set up a sub DAO for
You
myself and
definitely did
like
that. You definitely did that. I don't know why you're
I
lying about
I
it
think
on
I think the
podcast.
voters are expecting, you know, favors from me in return. Like I'm going to do this episode and feel good, and then suddenly I'm going to get some phone calls, you know, like, "Hey, remember when I voted for you on Rehash?"
Yeah,
So,
you
you
ready for
know,
that? It's
nothing's free.
coming.
Nothing's free. Yeah, yeah, I'm in debt.
Mhm.
I'm in debt to my constituents here.
What did you offer people? Like 1 ETH?
Oh, yeah, I mean, joke tokens, ETH, just like, you know, personal relationship advice, personal relationships, just generally. That one not very successful. Yeah, whatever, you know, whatever it takes really to win. I'm in it to win it. That's JokeDAO's motto.
Okay, I
David
also
is
want
in
to
it to win
preface here
it.
too, if this is the first podcast people are listening to with David and I, we've done this in the past and it was pure chaos. David
So,
is actually, contrary to what it sounds like, not an asshole at all. We are just good friends and we like to joke about things, and we will get serious at parts too, so don't worry about that. So
but the thing that the everyone listening to this is wondering now is like, is that preface a joke? So who knows? Who
is
knows?
it a joke or did you pay me to say that?
Or did I pay you to, was it governance? Yeah. Tana, it's really cool we're in a relationship now. Also, thank you. Appreciate that. Don't tell your husband. Yeah, anyway.
Well, we're in a certain kind of relationship, that's for sure. So
A
tell me
hostile,
about
hostile
tell,
relationship.
tell
Yes.
me about some of the other cool use cases you've seen JokeDAO used for. And I know you've talked about this on
Yeah.
other podcasts, so I don't want to get,
Okay.
spend too much time on this, but just so people can hear about like other fun ways, because I think
Yeah.
when people hear governance, they think, oh, so boring, old people, boring stuff. But what you've really done with JokeDAO is make governance fun again, I think. And
Thank
so can
you.
you
Thank
share
you.
some of the other use cases that you've seen that, are interesting and fun?
Yeah, let's do it. So the one you described for Rehash, and I think Rehash was just such a successful implementation of this, is the way any joke contest is set up is there's a submissions period where people can submit proposals in response to a prompt, and there's a voting period where they can vote on their favorites, right? And fundamentally, the two innovations here are submissions now mean that proposals are coming from the community to the core team rather than from the core team to the community. So you think about how governance has always been done in DAOs. It's always been like, shareholder capitalism. You have like a core team making a proposal to a board. Now you have the community itself saying, raising their voice. The voting is not totally unique, but the innovation, right, is ranked choice voting, so that you can actually see what people prioritize and how much they prioritize it. So instead of having like a normal grants round where you might have 10 different proposals, each to go through a yes/no vote, everyone has to choose individually, do we vote for it or not? If you had 10 of them up in a contest, then it would just be maybe the number one that gets voting, or you could distribute the funds to the top three proportionate to the votes, etc. Right? So that's the quick overview for what a contest is. In terms of use case, content creators is a really good one, right? So like Packy McCormick also used this. We've had some others too. To say like, what should I write about? What podcast guest should I have on? Tally actually used Rehash's model as well, to say like, yeah, who do we want to have on the show? And you have your community submit options for who they want, why they want them, and then they can campaign and then vote. And the third unlock that I didn't bring up is really that campaigning piece. This is where I think Rehash was really cool, was you had people actually going on social media, and so they're campaigning for themselves to vote. And so it becomes, this contest in a way where everyone in the DAO is playing a game against each other, And that goes to something I think we actually talked about in the last time I did a podcast with you, which is like we need more competition and we need more chaos. So like you want people to fight each other a little bit because that's how you build relationships. You don't build relationships by everyone just being nice to each other. You build relationships by mock contention, right? Joke contention, I would say. And so like joke contention is like really important. That's what a game is it's joke contention. It's a bunch of friends competing against each other. And you have that happen with Rehash, which is cool. Other use cases, we've had a few hackathons happen on it in different forms where you have proposals and then money is given to the winners to say, here's the top project. What's really cool about this is that a lot of times it's differentiated the people who generate the ideas from the people who build them. So traditionally in hackathons, you have the builders come together with an idea and say, this is what we want to build and here's why, and then they get approval for it. But what's cool when you do contests this way, and it's so easy, is you could have a community say, here's what we want to see built, but we're not personally going to build it, right? And I'll come back to that in a second. And so like Austin Griffith, Buildle, Gildle, Juicebox, like they've used it for like different forms of hackathons as well. And then we've seen it, for like contest giveaways. We've seen it for like curation, like what is the best, on-chain fashion. And there just was, a lot of beautiful bots that used it as well. Trying to airdrop farm us with contests like, do you like Steph Curry? And what are you guys doing for Chinese Valentine's Day? And just my favorite one, which is just the word love. And that was it. And there was no responses to that one, which, man, you want a portrait of 21st century romance right there. So lots of different use cases, for grants, hackathons, bounties, contest creation, etc. But the one I'm going to signal out here that I have not talked about publicly before is, I can't give names, but we are in talk with like 4, let's say, big-ish DAOs about actually using us for more formal governance. And what that would look like is, should I go into it? Should I do it?
Yeah, obviously.
Fuck it, let's go. Okay. So what that could look like is step 1 is what I described before. We could have community generate ideas. Be like, hey, here's what we want you to build, right? We really want you to focus on like treasury diversification, or like, no, we really want you to focus on building hotels, right? Like whatever it is. And so like everyone for the community can just say like, what do they prioritize? And you get this kind of like pulse check. That's a prioritization list of like, what is the community value? This is really meaningful, first of all, because the community finally has a voice, right? It's not just builders going and saying, what do you approve us to build this thing? It's the community themselves actually saying what they want. But they also are now prioritizing it. So you see like what the community wants most, which can really help with consensus. But the final thing that's really, I think, really powerful about this is that builders know what to build, because builders now can see, okay, this is what the community wants and this is what they value. And so this is where I should focus my energy if I want to get a proposal passed, because this is what they care about. So like step 1 would be like a pulse check, right? Step 2, now you do another contest. So you say like, this DAO really wants to build hotels, right? So like, let's get some builders to do proposals for like what hotel they're going to build, what that hotel looks like. And so now you have a bunch of builders, and they can all submit more formal proposals being like, I want to build the Taj Mahal. I want to build the Mirage, like for whatever hotel. I want to build a Holiday Inn, like whatever kind of hotel they want to build. They can go through it, full proposal, use rich text, add in the fancy headers and the fancy bolding and all the fancy pictures and GIFs for what their proposal is. And then again, the community can vote and say, okay, here's our favorite version of this. This is the one we really want to see. And again, this is nice because like instead of having the yes/no voting where just everything probably gets approved or there's a lot of social pressure to approve it, you instead can just have like really build consensus around overall like what the version is that people are excited by. Final contest you could do is you could do different variations of a proposal. So you could have someone submit a proposal, but like let's say some people don't like the timeline, other people don't like the budget, other people don't like the team, right? Those no votes might all be minority votes, but they will all group together to shoot down a proposal. And you have seen this happen repeatedly in MakerDAO. You've seen this happen in Lido. Like this is a very frequent occasion in DAOs where people like the idea of the proposal, but they disagree on the details. And so it loses and it doesn't pass. And it creates massive contention, right, within the DAO. Like huge disagreements because this thing is not passed and people are disagreeing on different details. And then what happens, the core team goes back and then they try another version of it, to say like, do you approve this or not? But like using the system, you could have people like essentially create different versions of the proposal to say, okay, we're keeping the proposal, but we're changing the budget. We're keeping the proposal, but we're changing the timeline. And then vote for the favorite version of the proposal, right, at top. And then that way you're first of all getting the best version of the proposal without guesswork, but you're also much more likely to build consensus and like really, keep out dissent and actually like increase the chances of proposals going through. So like those are I think the central DAO governance mechanisms and frameworks that we're really going to see. All alpha. First time talking about this here. You heard it on Rehash.
Super cool. I love how you have really thought about, I don't know, maybe I'm biased, but it really seems to me like JokeDAO, the features that you guys have built at JokeDAO are the exact features that we've needed in this space. And for some reason, nobody has built yet. And I don't know if that's just because like for my specific use cases, it makes the most sense, like the features that JokeDAO are building, or I'm just biased because you talk about it all the time and I'm in all these group chats that I get spammed about stuff all the time. It does seem like solved for a lot of the most common problems that we have faced in DAO governance for a very long time. And another feature that actually you didn't mention that I wanted to call out is your randomization feature. And I don't know if anybody else cares about this except for me, but I thought this was really cool because I had a conversation with Tina, HTML Tina from Element a while ago.
I love Tina.
She's a designer there, and she was telling me
Tina
about
fan.
like the psychology of UI and governance and like DAO voting and how the people at like the top of the list tend to get the most votes because those are the people that get seen first. They just get votes there and people don't want to scroll down and read everything. So, and we noticed this actually with our last season of guest nominations and voting is the people at the top of the list, we were using Snapshot, the people at the top of the list got way more votes than people at the bottom. Like there was maybe like one person in the bottom half that actually made it onto the leaderboard. And so this time around, we were able to use JokeDAO's randomization feature so that every time somebody logged in to vote, the order in which the names appeared would be randomly scrambled and appear in a different order every time. So that way that reduces a lot of UI bias that people have in voting in other scenarios. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, let me speak to that for a second. So something I've thought about is like, quadratic voting for delegates as well. Like so often you just see delegation systems where people are just delegating to whoever the top delegate is. And so that just totally centralizes voting in the hands of usually someone who's like a founder or big investor as well. They often delegate to themselves too, bring themselves to the top of the leaderboard. So like, you need things where it's like, each marginal delegation they get counts less so that like people are incentivized not to delegate to them because it really depletes their voting power as well. Stuff like that I think is going to be crucial. Decay over time also, right? So that like people don't just hold that delegation power for time unless it's like resubmitted to them. Like all of those pieces are just going to be crucial. But to go back to JokeDAO, like fundamentally, I think of governance as a curation process in which the real purpose is not the top decision and the top decision you're making and determining your course of action. The real purpose is surfacing data. Like the real value of governance is seeing like how does your community align on different issues. And so like a lot of times what's going to be really interesting in governance data is seeing that number 7 option that like, seems like it didn't get that many votes, but you realize everyone put all their votes towards it, right? Or it's like the same people voted on that as always vote together. So they should meet each other because they have some shared set of beliefs. Like there's all these ways that like the data just becomes really powerful as well. And the point there is that like governance is essentially a curatorial tool for surfacing content according to different metrics. And like fundamentally who wins a contest is based on the metrics that you decide. But what you want to think about is that like because it's a curatorial system, it is fundamentally a content moderation tool. Like all you're doing in governance is you're moderating content. You're upvoting it or you're downvoting it to see who's going to see it. Like you're just saying, this is what I want the rest of the community to see because it's going to be higher in the chart or lower in the chart. And so like when you start thinking about like governance as content moderation, it gets really interesting because fundamentally it's about what your community believes. Like overall, like is the content that matters to them. And what if people are submitting like racist or homophobic content? So like that's why it's really important that the first things we built were like, first of all, ability for content creators to delete proposals and say like, yeah, we're going to centralize this. Like if there's really objectionable content, they can delete it. If it's an issue that will surface, people can fork it, create their own DAO, but like they need to have that tool. Second of all, downvoting, like being able to like vote stuff down so that it doesn't appear at the top is also really important for content moderation. And so you can actually have decentralized content moderation where maybe instead of deleting stuff or censoring it, you can just lower it down in the list, right? And then randomization circling back finally to the point you made, like is really, really crucial in avoiding bias, because like fundamentally any content moderation tool is a tool for bias. Like the point of it is to bias others into voting for something or supporting it. And like that's okay. Like, if campaigning is a big part of governance and it builds relationship, like that's fine. But it's really important, right, that we control for what is essentially a bias creation tool, in also being able to like control against implicit bias within the system itself as well. So that was like all of our first upgrades. We're really focused on that, and I do think it's just always helpful to think of governance as content moderation.
I forgot about the downvote feature that you guys just released, and I'm excited to test that out next season. I don't know what implications that has with, voting for people, like downvoting people. I don't know if that it could potentially have harmful effects on people's morale or mental state. Maybe that is not the best use case for the downvote, but I am interested to test it out and kind of see how it goes, and
But you're also using one of your votes in a downvote that you could have used in an upvote, right? So it's like to do that is really, it's interesting because it really means that your strategy is no longer trying to win. Your strategy is like just morally opposed to something. So like we've seen so far, like people don't really use them. I think we also, within the joke races we run every week, you don't get any rewards for using it either. So there isn't a lot of incentive. But like, yeah, it is an interesting thing to think about, like what that implication is. Obviously, Twitter has played with this for years too, without ever fully embracing it, for exactly the reasons you said, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So something you touched upon that I want to kind of break down a little bit more is you brought up a few use cases for tokens that are non-financial in nature. So when most people think about tokens, their mind immediately goes to ERC-20s, usually first, monetary for financial value tokens, or maybe some people in the NFT space goes to ERC-721s, 1155s, like art NFTs, those tokens. But you wrote a long ass Twitter thread, shocker. David wrote a long Twitter thread about different non-financial use cases for tokens. And you've already brought up a couple of those. So with JokeDAO, for example, you have your governance tokens, which don't have any financial value, and they're solely for the purpose of voting for something. And you also mentioned social graph
I don't read my tweets. You're gonna have to explain them to me.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll explain it to you.
I would not read my threads. Yes,
liking a tweet is like voting for somebody, essentially.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that like social aspect can also represent a token. So I guess I should refresh your recollection of what the other kinds of tokens you wrote about.
I did look at it briefly. I skimmed it before this, so I can try.
Okay. Can you sort of just like describe the different types of tokens you talked about? I'm especially curious about like the social graph one and the messaging one, because I think when people like may not immediately make that connection, if you talk about like a messaging thing as a token, can you kind of like talk about those and also like how you see them play out in real life?
Yeah, so I think the best way to think of a token is as a public record of ownership. But where it gets kind of meta is that it's also defining the thing that you own, and sometimes the thing you own is the token itself, right? Which is like fundamentally what money is, right? Money is a certificate of ownership saying that you own like this thing itself, which is money, right? Technically it's debt that is owed to you, like in theory, but like it's a little self-reflexive. And so we start to collapse these layers together and just saying like a token is money. Like a token just means that you have a right to buy something or sell it. But what you're the right to buy and sell is the right to buy and sell the token itself, right? So a token is a right to buy and sell itself. And like this gets a little crazy to think about. But the thing is, it could also refer to outside objects, right? It could refer to art. And so like that's why we often complain that NFTs are not fully on chain, because the token is representing ownership of an off-chain asset, which might be on AWS, right? Which is art. Broadly speaking, I think you can think about tokens as like there's fungible tokens where 1 ETH equals 1 ETH. There's non-fungible tokens where there's only one version of it, right? That's unique, but it's part of a collection, NFTs. And then there's non-transferable NFTs or non-transferable tokens, which are bound to your wallet, right? And so they go by cool names like soul-bound tokens, which I'll never totally understand, but like, yeah, non-transferable. And so then, you can start to think about how these integrate with each other and with other outside systems. But like fundamentally, always, like I said in governance, right? Like what is the real point of governance? It's surfacing data. And tokens are kind of the same thing. Like because they're public, they're surfacing a lot of data. And so, yeah, they're surfacing data about, whatever object they refer to. Like if you have an NFT, it is surfacing data about the art that it refers to. And that art might change over time, right? Like Dom Hoffman did this really cool experiment with corruptions where like the art itself is changing over time. But they also could refer to each other or to the wallet itself or to other things within the wallet. Like you start to get these interesting data patterns. And so I didn't go that deep on rereading my tweet, but I think what I was probably referring to is that you get a social graph, like Backdrop is doing this, where you can like map out, people who tend to own one token also tend to own another, right? Like we've noticed a lot of people who own FWB also own, Cabin or Crass House, whatever it is. And so you can start to see those kinds of overlaps, right? You can also just see who else is in that community, right? Like if I buy the Cabin token, now that might give me access rights to join anyone else who has a Cabin token. And so that could be for, the Discord. You might go through Guild and join it. But it could also, again, be through like JokeDAO. Like now that you have the Cabin token, that's getting you a right to compete in these contests. And so it starts opening up like all these layers where you are getting a right to communicate owning this token. And maybe you're getting a right to communicate with other token holders, or maybe you're getting a right to communicate with totally other groups. And so projects can start to build around these tokens to say, like, these tokens are access rights, like beyond their initial conception, whatever they were designed for, these are now access tools to be able to find other people, maybe to be able to message other people, being able to reach out, being able to find, being able to, reveal identity about them, to decrypt data, all of these pieces as well. And so, I think this space has kind of been a quagmire because everyone's so focused on price go up and so focused on tokens as money. And like, again, the problem there is it's self-referential, is like that money's only worth something if people think it's worth something. And so in a bull market, it's worth a lot because everyone else thinks it's worth a lot. In a bear market, it's not worth anything because nobody else thinks it's worth anything. But like fundamentally, you're in a hall of mirrors with that if the token can't do anything else. But once the token can start to do other things, it can start giving you governance rights. It can start letting you message people. It can start letting you meet other people, right? Like I think FWB was one of the early groups of this insight. Like then that token really starts to have incentive to be held and to have value because it actually can be meaningful in personal contexts as well. And so like the irony is that if you really want tokens to have financial value, you can only get there if they have massive non-financial value because they need to have all these use cases, right? Because otherwise people are buying money for the sake of buying money. But like, what do people generally buy? They don't go out and just say, I'm going to buy 10 euros today. A stock might be an equivalent to that, but like you buy toys, you buy clothes, like, and so we're moving, I think, more and more in that direction of understanding that like real value often for these tokens has to come from non-financial values. And I think we're going to talk about another thread I did on Blockspace as well. And that kind of puts a dent in this theory because that is a case where you can have money as money, but it's very, very rare and it's hard to pull off. And you really need to be at a protocol layer to do that.
Okay, let's go there. So you had another long thread. This was like over 20 tweets. Like how do you honestly, like how do you go about writing these threads? Because I just don't have the patience to write like a 20 tweet thread ever.
Good question. Yeah, I would say it's actually like, 20 tweets is not that many words compared to like the articles I write.
Yeah, but at
So
that
the
point, why not just write an article?
I probably should have. I mean, in retrospect, I was reading back through this. I was like, wow, I really condensed a lot of things to try to make this make sense. I don't know that I understand all of this. Like, who wrote this thing?
I
It
didn't.
seems
I didn't
smart.
understand any of it.
Seems smart, but like, does it make sense? So yeah, that might have been a good case for me to do an article instead. Typefully helps. Masochism, I would say, is like really, really key part of the writing process. Just like self-flagellation really helps. Yeah,
Those are
those are kind of my productivity hacks. Yeah, I'm actually writing a thread about those right now. Yeah, how to flagellate 7 tips for flagellating yourself that you just won't believe.
Oh, I can't wait.
So stay
Are
tuned.
you sure that doesn't need to be an article?
I'm gonna do both to maximize engagement. Don't worry.
Okay, great.
I'm gonna hate myself for doing that, but it goes right in with the theme, so it's perfect.
This long ass tweet thread that we're talking about, the first one, it says the real metaverse real estate isn't virtual land, it's block space. And then I didn't understand anything else you wrote in the thread. So could you please explain what you meant?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try. So Blocks, right, are batches of transactions. And so if you have ever, tried to use Ethereum when a lot of other people are using it, you notice that you have high gas fees, right? And same thing is true for Bitcoin. Like, this is effectively surge pricing. It's like, when you order an Uber and there aren't that many Ubers, you're facing the laws of supply and demand, you're going to have to pay more to get one, right? And so Blockspace works like this. Like, there's only so many transactions per blocks. They can only move so quickly. It's like filling up a train, and everyone's trying to pile on the train, and they can only take so many. So those who pay more get in the train, right? And like, I think that is like a really, really simple model for valuing a token, is to say, how much are people willing to pay right now for the gas? Like, how much are they willing to pay to get on this train and to get this transaction through? And this is a bit sacrilegious to say that, because traditionally the way of, like calculating costs would be like, for Bitcoin, would be, what's the computational power required in order to mine this and then pay it out. But like, I think fundamentally, like, you're paying for time, you're paying for speed, you're paying to get this, as quickly as you can. You think about using MetaMask, like the options it gives you. Do you want this slow, medium, or fast? Like, you're paying for time, right? And fundamentally, like, what a blockchain is it's like a drug dealer that's dealing you time. It's like, hey kid, you want the 1 second shit or you want the 10-second shit, right? And you're like, oh, I want the 1 second shit. Like, I'm gonna have to chill out for that, right? So that's like a simplest model would be like model one, right? Of just like paying for time, like paying to get faster access, right? And surge pricing. Where things get interesting is when you add proof of stake, because like what you're paying for in the system I just described is you're paying to get transactions validated, right? To say like, I'm going to get this transaction through on a blockchain, which means it's got to be validated. When you have proof of stake, now there's a new element that's added, which is that you can stake your tokens to validate transactions. So now you're essentially buying tokens not to get validated, but to do validation, right? To validate other transactions. And the key there is you are putting these out there, and in return, you are getting tokens back, right? And so then the question is like, how much is this worth it to me to validate like other transactions? In other words, like, how much am I going to get back of this token, and is it worth it to me? And so like that model, and this is contentious. There's a really good Bankless episode on this recently where they're talking about, pricing the merge, and they debate this. But like I would say fundamentally, like, the model there is a bond, right? It's like you are putting in a bunch of money and then getting interest back over time, and then you're also able to recoup your initial capital as well. Arthur Hayes has a really good piece on how you can actually value ETH as bonds. It's a little tricky because you are figuring out like how much ETH is worth in ETH, but then you can think like how much USDC would I have to buy up on this ETH in order for it to like be worth the amount of ETH it pays back. So that's like the second model, which is a more complex one, which is like bonds, right? And then I think there's maybe like two other models that you can like derive from there. And so one, which I think is maybe a weaker model, was like when protocols just ask you to pay in their native token. They're like, hey, we have a service we're going to do for you. We're going to, but the only way we do that service is if you pay us in our token. Like, I'm selling you clothes, but you have to pay me in clothes token, right, to get it. And like, that can work, but like you're not getting what you get in the first two models where it's at an actual protocol layer of people like paying the protocol in its native currency, because fundamentally what's now going to happen is like those tokens that you're paying with are being run on a different protocol, right? You're paying an ERC20 that's run on Ethereum. And so like, yeah, you can do models like that, but it also starts to sound a little silly because it's like, well, why do you only have to pay in closed token? Like, why couldn't I also just pay in USDC? Like, why couldn't I pay in another token as well, right? ETH, you understand, like, in order to pay the gas fees, you have to pay it, you have to pay in ETH. Bitcoin, you understand, in order to get the transaction through, you have to pay it in Bitcoin. But for clothes token, like, you might have, like, that's just arbitrary that they set it so that you would have to buy the token, and it's kind of annoying, like, that you have to buy clothes token to get it. And this is kind of like their way of trying to get people to use the token, but it's not really necessary. And so that I would say is like a somewhat weak model that we see a lot. But then there's another really interesting model, and the final one, and this is similar to the proof of stake bonding model, and that one is like a toll collector model, where it's like you stake these tokens to validate transactions, and then you get paid in whatever currency people are paying. And this is cool because you can actually now let anybody pay whatever currency they want, but the stakers are now getting that currency as well as a dividend. And so I can put down to validate transactions, but I can get paid in other tokens as well. So bond model you put down ETH and you get ETH in return. In the toll booth model, you might put down ETH, but you might get other things. You might get optimism tokens or, Polygon tokens or whatever it is. And the only protocol I know of that does anything like that is Bundler, which is a really cool project where you can, I think, long-term stake Bundler tokens, but meantime, people are actually paying in whatever currency they want to use Arweave. And it's really cool that they've set the financial rails where you no longer just have to pay Arweave and Arweave tokens. You can pay them however you want, and they can handle the conversion for you. And meanwhile, stakers can get paid as well. The issue, right, with this final model is I think it's by far the best model. I think it's 100% the way the world will go forward. There's massive legal challenges with that being a security. If you're owning a token that gives you rights to dividends and other forms of money, you start to raise security issues within the US. Also, a reminder that the US is way behind on all of this, and there's a massive opportunity for the 95% of the world population that does not live in the US to follow these kind of models, which frankly, I think are superior. Did that roughly do it?
Yeah, that did. You've obviously done your research on this stuff, and I've seen you tweet about other blockchains, and you've mentioned a few and what you just said right now. But one that I've seen you tweet about, I think a lot, is Cosmos. And I was wondering about your take on Cosmos and why you're a Cosmos maxi.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know how to define myself as anything maxi, but I do love Cosmos. I love other projects too. It's not just Cosmos, but I do think Cosmos has a really special role that they play for a few reasons. So one is to think all a blockchain is a way of verifying truth, a decentralized way of verifying truth, right? To say this transaction goes through. Now we need hundreds of people around the world to all validate this transaction went through. It's not false, right, etc. And so the dream that we have heard up until recently has always been about global finance, right? And I think the best example of this is probably Solana, of thinking how do we create a global payments rail where the bottom line is just anyone in the world can transact with anyone else in the world. And that was Bitcoin's original goal. That's Solana's. Ethereum has obviously followed this as well. All the major projects are just how do you create this global layer so anybody anywhere can transact with anyone else anywhere? And the only way that you decide what is true in that system is whether the validators agree that it happened or not, right? But recently we started seeing I don't want to say necessarily a potential issue. I think it's maybe a little overblown, but a lot of questions around protocol layer censorship. Meaning, what if the US government says, hey, anyone who's transacted with Tornado Cash, those are illegal. What are you going to do? Well, now you can start having people not validate those transactions, refuse to validate them, because they know if they validated them, the US government would arrest them, right? And so this is protocol layer censorship where Coinbase might not want to, validate those transactions. And so this raises a question of what is truth? Did that transaction go through? Did it not go through? What are people's motives? Is it a true transaction? And when we talk about truth, we're talking about law, what the law agrees we can allow. And so, in terms of sanctions, etc., you really start to see that there can be different forms of validation. And so even an example within Ethereum's own history with the DAO hack, where people said, you know what? Fuck that. We're not going to acknowledge that hack happened. We're going to say that hack is not true because we have social consensus that can override it. And the social consensus will decide that never happened. And so we as a group will come together, and even though the technology wouldn't necessarily agree, we agree as social consensus that this didn't happen. So you start to see there's massive use cases for differences in truth, right? And this will only expand as we move past blockchains just handling transactions towards handling other types of data long term as well, where it won't just be did the transaction go through or not. So to go back to Cosmos, think about this in the future where you might have one version of a chain, right, that wants to say everything that happens on this chain is validated. Another one says, no, sorry, if oligarchs use this or if North Korea is using this, we're not validating that because that's our choice. This is a decentralized system. We decide what is true or not. And we don't want to say that's a true transaction because those people are criminals. Fuck them, right? And so you start to have these different forks and different variations of chains. And so this really breaks the kind of model that we've been talking about before, of this dream of the global finance layer of P2P payments, which is a very cool dream and allows for maximum composability and is amazing. And I love that thesis too. But like Cosmos' thesis is no, everyone's going to want their own blockchain because blockchains are a product of social consensus. They are not a product of deterministic technology. They are a product of what we decide is true or not. And so if you're a game, you might want to have your own blockchain where you can rewrite the rules to the game. You can kick people out. You can deny them transactions, right? Or like as a matter of social consensus. And so, like, fundamentally, what Cosmos is doing is a blockchain of blockchains for anybody to be able to run their own blockchain as well. And when you start to think that, like, a lot of the blockchains of the future won't just be financial, they're going to be data blockchains, right? They're going to be blockchains for encryption and decentralized data and for storage and indexing. Like, those are not ones that could operate anyway on a global financial rails. They need to have their own blockchain anyway because they're doing fundamentally different things with different types of data and different requirements. And so, like, Cosmos's promise is like anybody can basically whip up their own blockchain, and now with their new upgrades, have interchain security as well, where they can each be providing security to one another. And I think this is like when you start to think, first of all, that truth is relative, and second of all, that blockchains are not all going to be financial. They're going to take lots of other forms. You start to see how powerful this is, right? To have that kind of sovereignty. And so the trade-off here is like when you have maximum sovereignty for the chain, for people to be able to decide what's true and not, you trade off permissionlessness because you no longer have that global rail where anybody can draw on any other transaction. And so the question is, how do you get back to that? How do you get back to that kind of like global settlement layer where anybody can see what any other chain has done if you want to be able to, take a flash loan out on one chain and then trade it on another chain? And that's where stuff like, I think next generation stuff like Celestia, which is being built in the Cosmos ecosystem, is just really, really cool because it allows anyone to spin up their own chain. They don't have to worry about the process of decentralization. They already will have decentralized validator sets that they can rely on, but they still have the sovereignty and control. And they also have some permissionlessness, even though it's async. It's not atomic composability. They have permissionlessness to be able to draw on everyone else's chain as well while providing shared security. And I know I just went a little technical there, but like this is, I think, just a huge unlock towards anyone basically being able to create their own society. Because fundamentally, a blockchain is a society. It's a rule of governance and law around a shared currency run by the people who operate it. And like fundamentally, if you don't believe there should be one world society that everyone operates in, then you probably believe in Cosmos.
Wow. Wow. What I'm excited about is the day when no code tools are built for all of these things. And so like a non-technical community manager could go could go and spin up their own blockchain for their own DAO with
one
click.
tap blockchains, right? Yeah. That's Celestia. Like that's fundamentally, Celestia is the most brilliant technical writing out there, but like you want to simplify it, like that's Celestia's promise. It's like one tap blockchain. And even Nader, who works there, has like done some recent tutorials where I think it takes like an hour right now or something, but it's like pretty quick to deploy your own blockchain, right? Rehash could just have its own, like run by the community. Yeah.
That would be super cool. One day we'll get there. The last thing I want to ask you about, David, is you're an investor as well at a what do you call it? A firm, at a place, at an organization, at a group.
Angels Collective.
Yeah. Angels Collective called Cowfund. Which, by the way, you should be proud of me for resisting the urge to laugh at all the words that I keep hearing cow puns put into. Like,
where are you?
Community. I cannot hear community as like, oh, it's cow. It's like there's cow
it's
community
cow, it's
or
cow
community.
Community. Yeah.
All right. So anyway,
do you appreciate my heifer joke yesterday? By the way, like I said, I would always be happy to heifer out.
Good. Yeah. Did you get my Did you get? I had two puns.
Steering another direction. Wait, I missed the other one. I only got the steering joke. What was the other one?
Go back and read it. You got to go back and read it after.
Oh my God, missing cow puns. This is a disaster for me. Yeah, I've lost it.
It's really unacceptable. It's very unacceptable. But last thing I wanted to ask you is could you give us some insight into your Web3 investment thesis? Obviously, you're super well researched. You know the space super well. Like, what do you look for in projects you invest in? What is your investment thesis? Give us some alpha.
Yeah, I am I smart enough to have a strict investment thesis? I would say, actually, like my training is in Web 2 tech to a great degree. I try not to bring that up. It's like a little embarrassing. It's pretty boomer. But like, I do think like the fundamental things that drove Web 2 companies to success, like in some ways, some of those don't hold. Moats don't hold, right? In Web 3. But other ones like network effects are more powerful than ever, And so, like, fundamentally, yeah, like what you always want to think about is like, why is this project going to get stronger the more people that use it? It's a very fundamental thesis that's very familiar to any Web 2 company as well. But thinking about network effects in that way, I think, is like a really, really simple tool to understand success of a project. More broadly, I'm really focused on data, and the stuff I'm really interested in is data infrastructure and thinking about blockchains beyond financial applications towards a lot of other use cases for decentralized data more broadly. So that's I say would be another big piece. And generally, I would say true for DAOs, true for consumer products, true for L1s. Modularity is really, really important. Web 3, I don't think could compete with Web 2 in terms of kind of vertical integration. Having giant companies with giant teams and resources that do everything in-house has been a massive win for these winner-takes-all companies in Web 2. The way to go up against that is not to try to replicate it. The way to go up against it is to think, what can we do that Web 2 cannot do? And what Web 3 can do that Web 2 cannot do is create composable kind of fractal units that can compose together, break apart together, create sub-DAOs, fracture, fork, etc. And so that's where like service DAOs become really interesting because they can all work together and building up each other's value, trading, swapping tokens, and effectively, quote unquote, investing in each other as well. And so thinking like what is modular is another thing that I would say I tend to ask myself a lot because like modular use cases are just really powerful. And to do one quick shout out here, I've been talking about modular blockchains and talking about like Celestia, but like something like Guild is just a really, really powerful, I think, Web3 tool because it is a way to whip up a community in 2 seconds based on whatever requirements you want to set. But it also integrates with all these other services. So it integrates with Web 2 services like Twitter, right, and Telegram and Discord. And like the way they think about this, which is like, how do we maximize different use cases for a really simple product with a really simple, goal, which is whipping up a community, becomes so powerful because of their ability to integrate. And so like, I think, the Web 2 model, this is where we break the Web 2 model. The Web 2 model is all about being proprietary. The Web 3 model is all about integration and interoperability. And that even, it sounds sacrilegious, but that needs to be interoperable with Web 2 tools as well. And so, like, Guild is just a really great example of building a really modular tool that is not about solving problems. Every other DAO company wants to solve the problems of DAOs, solving the problems of payments and finance and multi-sig management. And Guild went in the opposite direction, and they said, no, we're not going to solve problems. We're going to create new opportunities. We're going to create things that are totally unique in Web3 that you couldn't do before. And I would say this, that's a driving force for hopefully what we're building at JokeDAO too, which is the reason people haven't built this is because everyone always thinks of the problems that they see from the tools that they're currently using instead of the new opportunities that don't exist yet.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. We got to get out of our skeuomorphic thinking and try to innovate in a Web3 native way, which is a lot easier said than done.
Really hard.
Really hard.
Really hard.
Yeah. All right. That's all I've got for you, David, but I've got a few questions.
Cool. Let's go.
Fun rapid fire questions
Boom.
for you to wrap up. All right. So first one, you get to rebrand anything in Web3 and it's guaranteed to stick. What do you rebrand?
What do I, so I have to pick, wait, how's this work? I pick a company.
Rebrand something in Web3.
I like all Web3. I like,
no, you don't. We're just talking about how great Web 2 is.
No, MakerDAO should be unMakerDAO. Destruction is always way more fun than creation. Unmake it. Yeah, there we go.
All right.
Sorry, Maker.
Second question. If you could wave a magic wand and any Web3 app, tool, or protocol would immediately appear, what would it be?
Wait. So I can just like whip a company into existence right now?
Yeah, immediately.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the thing I really want to see is like multi-party messaging. On chain. The messaging itself doesn't have to be on chain, but like fundamentally, you should be able to find anyone else who like meets certain requirements, shares a token with you, or has voted for the same thing as you. However you want to set that, there should be a tool where you can reach out to them, and that might be an off-chain tool. But like, if different people who are all coordinating around a vote, for example, could all message each other without revealing each other's identity, only being able to reach each other through a multi-party, encrypted service, we're going to see this stuff soon, thanks to stuff like Lit, but we haven't yet. And like, it just unlocks Web3 social in a giant way. for anybody to be able to communicate with others without revealing their identity. And yeah, I feel like it's a giant missing piece for actually creating social layers for Web3.
That would be really cool. I could see Lens or something building something like that.
I hope so.
Yeah.
This is brought to you by Lens Protocol, the top name in Web3 social. If you haven't, please check it out. It's lens.app, and wow, just a pleasure to use.
Thank you so much. You want to just come on every episode and plug our sponsors. Third question. If JokeDAO were a famous person or animal or character, whether real or made up, from history or pop culture, who would they be?
Oh, definitely a beaver. Yeah. I don't have a specific beaver in mind. But yeah, I do think, first of all, beavers great at governance. They slap at the water with their tails if they see a predator coming. They keep watch out. They have division of roles, right? Allocate resources really well for the winter and burning it. But like fundamentally, I just love, beavers create through destruction. And so like, yeah, just creating chaos in order to create things is like very much at the heart of the project. And like, I would actually say all beavers would be my answer.
Oh, beavers. There's such a range, though. I just Googled famous beavers and it pulled up Mr. and Mrs. Beaver from the
No,
Chronicles
they're not
of
included.
Narnia.
No, fuck them.
Okay,
Yeah,
what
no
about the
way.
beaver from Lady and the Tramp?
No, fuck that beaver. That beaver's not included.
What about Pudgy Beaver Mom from Ice Age 3?
Is it real? No, it's from Ice Age 3. Fuck it.
What about the nice beaver from The Naked Gun?
You know what? This is our problem with society: is that we only valorize animated beavers, and we love them, and we don't valorize actual, real fucking beavers. We're way more impressive with what they do. Watch the David Attenborough like video on YouTube of him just like talking with beavers. It's amazing, and you will learn so much about how to actually construct a society. That every DAO should study this. Every DAO needs to study fucking real life beavers. None of the Mrs. Maisel beaver shit. This is a hard take. Hot take.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for coming to David's TED Talk. Next question.
Yeah.
If money were no
yes.
If money were no issue, what would you be doing today? And don't say the same thing you're doing today because that's lame.
If I can't be doing wouldn't be doing JokeDAO? Like
if money were no issue,
yeah.
like if you were financially set for the rest of your life, what would you be doing?
I don't what spending it? I don't know.
On what?
I'm a digital nomad right now, and I'm living in some like kind of limited environments right now. They're nice, they're fine, but like if that like had a more operational kitchen, and I could get like some like really nice ingredients. I'm vegan. I get a private chef to cook like amazing vegan food because nutrition is always just like kind of a challenge. It feels bad to say that though. What a shitty thing to do. When you could.
But I mean, what would you be doing with your life? Would you just be like sitting in your apartment, eating vegan food?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'd also be supporting cows. I hope like setting up a cow sanctuary. I think would be really cool. Doing like more work for like animal welfare and like supporting those causes. I just don't want to go to the fancy galas, where you like raffle off the Cadillac or whatever. For actually, maybe I do. I do want to get these fancy people to have to show up to support cows and make them all talk about how much they love cows. I would use it. I would use it actually in like I would just buy people out to have to espouse my personal values at fancy galas, where they all would have to go around talking about how much they love cows. That's what I would do, and we would spread awareness for veganism and for animal rights activism by just buying out people and their moral values and bribing them to say whatever I want them to say. That's what
you are super into bribery. You've thought about this a lot.
I think that was like we're supporting cows here. This is the right thing to do.
Bribery is okay. Bribery is okay. Collusion's okay as long as we're doing it for a good cause.
What do you think gas fees are? What do you think we just talked about for the past hour? Like, what do you think MEV? Like, all of this is just bribery. It's just you're bribing people to prioritize you because you have the money and they don't. So if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna use it for fucking cows. Yeah, that's my answer.
I like it. Okay, last one. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Berlin.
Okay. Cool. So are you staying there and never coming back? Is that what you're saying?
No, unfortunately, there's this like legal code which I didn't really know about because I thought it was all just on chain or something. But like, yeah, I need to return. I also like. I think it's helpful not to totally live in one place. Maybe this comes from like my personal commitment issues. Well, we'll save that for the next podcast.
Yeah. We'll talk about your personal relationship advice.
The
that you
Maury,
talked about at the
the
beginning.
Oprah version of this, right? Well, I'll open up for a touching episode of Rehash.
I'm actually curious. Why don't you wrap up, David, by just giving us your best personal relationship advice that you give all these people that you give advice to, allegedly?
Like actual funny advice. What do you want? Like what are we looking for?
Whatever you want.
Communicate. It's just like it's so hard. No one knows how to do it.
What did you say?
Communicate.
Cow moon.
Okay.
Kamoon. I just want you to enunciate. Yeah.
Kamoon. Yeah.
Okay. Better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Exactly.
Before you go, David, tell people where they can find you if they are super into really long Twitter threads that they're not going to understand. And then feel free to plug away anything else you like.
Yeah, no, my Substack's better, actually. So that's davidphelps.substack.com. If you really want to subject yourself to the, disgusting engagement farming that I'm prone to and my, fragile ego driven attempt to build social capital, you can follow me on Twitter. That's at divine_economy. And but yeah, love to see you following me there.
Is that handle ever going to switch to fragile_economy at any point? Or are we sticking with the divine?
I think, at this point it's just wishful thinking, but to be honest, it always was.
Yeah, fair. All right. Well, thanks so much, David, for taking the time and coming on and sharing all of your thoughts. Everybody go follow David, go follow our sponsors, follow all of the companies and projects that David name dropped on this episode. Hit him up if you have any questions, and we will be back again soon with another episode of Rehash.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Rehash, a Web3 podcast. The guest in this episode, David Phelps, was nominated by Ellie Dots and voted onto the podcast by Diana Chen, The Metagame, Ellie Dots, Anastasia Uglova, Scott Moore, and other anonymous community members. Some of the questions you heard were submitted by Karsten and Ellie Dots. Rehash is hosted by Diana Chen, produced and edited by Ellie Dots and Tyler Internet, sponsored by Lens, Avenue, and Govern, and as always, supported by RehashDAO. To stay up to date on all things Rehash, you can follow us on Twitter at RehashWeb3 and join our Discord to get involved.